have coming out in short order a film on the Exodus. So I want to talk about that with you, and I want to address it with three questions. The first one is, does it matter whether the Exodus was a historical event or not? The second is historical versus history. And the third is, what do we learn from the historic event of the Exodus? Does it matter? Many people today will say, no, it doesn't matter. People express their faith through stories all around the world. We call those myths. And so it is argued the Bible is one more of the great myths of the world. The problem with that is, whatever the Bible is, it's not myth. When you put down all of the characteristics of myths in a column, and then the central characteristics of the Bible in a column, you discover they are different point by point by point. Most importantly, the Bible bases its stories, if you want to call them that, in this world, not the never land of primeval history or time, which is where the myths are based. The Bible alone says we know God because of what He did in our human history. My question then is, where did they get that idea? If everybody else is saying, no, the gods, they live in some other world, and this world is a dim reflection of that. If that's what everybody else is saying, where does the Bible get the idea, no, this is a real world, and the transcendent God has broken in upon us? So the Bible says over and over again, our faith is based in evidence. Our faith is based in facts which have occurred. Now you say, is that important? Well, yes, it is. Suppose I were to say to you that I am Napoleon. I know I'm Napoleon. I really am. You really ought to see Josephine. Oh, what a doll. And if it hadn't been for that fool Ney, I would have beat Wellington all hollow. I'm Napoleon. I know it. And you would say, somebody go find the fellas in the white coats. This poor guy has lost it. But I know it. I believe it. I'm sure of it. Why don't you believe it? Because in fact, my faith is an illusion. Why is it an illusion? Because it is not based on any verifiable fact outside of me. The same is true for us. We may say, oh, I believe in the resurrection, but of course Jesus never rose from the dead. That's an illusion on the same level as Napoleon. So it does matter whether the Exodus took place or not, because the Exodus in many ways is the whole basis for Israel's conviction that they are called by God. And the Exodus then is the basis for their unique theology. I'm convinced that in fact it is precisely because of the Exodus that the Hebrews did come to realize God is at work in history. So yes, it matters. But people will say, but the Bible is not really history. If it was history, then you could read it, I could read it, and we would both reconstruct the events in the very same way. So it's not history, because you read it, I read it, our reconstructions are a little bit different. I would freely grant the Bible is not written to be a history book. It's written to be the book of God. So we are given enough historic material, enough historic facts, so that we can say, yes, there's good reason to believe these things took place. Now then, what do we learn about God from them? So the Bible is not written to be a history book. But that fact does not mean that its reports are therefore unhistorical. It is historical, as we can see again and again if we compare it to the ancient writings of the rest of the world and to modern history. If we were to devise a scale and say ancient writing is over here and modern history writing is here, the Bible is here. Yes, it is historical. So it does matter. What do we learn from the Exodus if it was in fact a genuine occurrence? We learn, above everything else, God's faithfulness to His promises. The Western world has believed in truth. You know why? Because of the Old Testament. Because the Old Testament shows us a God who is true. The Old Testament is not interested in truth as an abstract concept, but it does know a God who is true. He's true to His promises. He promised to Abraham that he would be a great people living in the land and that his people would be a blessing to all the world. But hey, these Hebrews are slaves in Egypt. Can God keep His promises? Oh yes. Now, if the Exodus never occurred, who's to say God can keep His promises? You may believe it, I may believe it, but it is an illusion. There is no evidence to support it. So we learn of God's faithfulness. We learn of God's hesed, that is His unfailing love. The love that He showed to the Hebrew people in spite of their faithlessness. Moses came and said, God's going to get you out of here. And they said, oh, wonderful. But as soon as things got tough, no. But God kept His promises because of His unfailing love. So does it matter whether the Exodus occurred? It surely does. If it didn't, the Hebrew people's understanding of themselves is worthless. Is the Exodus historical? Yes. It's not presented as a legend. It's presented as factual. And what do we learn? We learn the foundations of biblical truth. God is faithful. God is love.